Welcome to the Purple Sky Thinking for Leaders podcast. This podcast is for you if you lead people, teams, or the organisation. You might be a leader or a manager yourself, or you might be part of the support team to help those people to be really successful. I'm Anwen Bottois. I'm the leadership success coach and founder of Purple Sky Consulting, and I'm going to be the host for this podcast. My mission is to help as many leaders as possible to really love what they do. I want to help you to feel more confident, more capable, more effective, so that you can build and grow happy, healthy, more successful teams. This podcast is going to be all about helping you to love leading. Let's get started.
Welcome to this episode of the Purple Sky Thinking for Leaders podcast. I'm really delighted to have Sarah Manley from The Quiet Catalyst with us today. And we're going to be talking all things introverts. And what does that mean for you as a leader? And how can we help you to help them shine? So that's going to be our focus for our conversation today. Welcome, Sarah. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for the invitation. Really looking forward to the conversation.
Excellent. What we're going to do is just ask you to do a little intro about yourself, what you'd like to share with our listeners, our viewers, and then what you're doing now and why you're doing that.
Yeah, sure. Happy to share. It reminds me though straight away of, when we go around the circle and we put people on the spot, like, tell us who you are and an interesting fact about yourself. But luckily, I built this muscle. I built this muscle as an introvert over time. No, but in all seriousness, so who am I? Where do I come from? So I work these days as a coach and mentor to help introverts thrive in their careers. So I've been working in this space now for about a year, off the back of a 20-year corporate career where I was climbing the ladder bit by bit as an introvert, and on the outside looked very successful. I was doing well, I was doing okay, but on the inside, I was having to learn a lot the hard way and trying to fit this extroverted mold. But actually, I'm a very deep, quiet, reserved introvert. So after 20 years, I put my hand up for redundancy and went on a bit of an adventure. So I wrote my book, Quiet Catalyst, which was published in May this year. And off the back of that, started this brilliant journey into coaching and mentoring and speaking, really to help people like myself to learn how to thrive without trying to fit this extroverted mold, just by being yourself, by being authentic to yourself. And I really have this mission now to help people by shaking the status quo of what it means to be an introvert in the business world. So that's why I'm here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I just think it's such an important area of focus. And, I think quite often we can all think that these, real confidence and loads of confidence is completely the thing that is about extroversion, but it's not, is it? And it's about kind of how do we unpack all of that and how do we help our introverts to really shine? Because there's more to it than that. So we're going to really get into some of that in a minute, which I'm really looking forward to. So for most listeners, we like to get to know people a little bit better. And again, this might be pushing those introvert buttons, but hopefully with a warning of the question, it's not too uncomfortable. So tell us a little bit about where you like to travel, or if you've got a favourite holiday destination, where have you loved?
Yeah. So I'm a typical introvert in the way that I like a bit my home comforts. So it's not weird for me to have a holiday at home with a book.
Yeah.
But when I do go, my favourite holidays have often just been in the UK. So big fan of the Lake District, big fan of Keswick in the lakes and around there. Favourite thing to do would be to walk around Derwentwater, a little pack up lunch, find a coffee and a cake somewhere on the way, something like that. A bit further afield, I love the south of France, just for a bit of warm climate and so on. But to be honest, I'm not a great traveller. I like to learn about places and people and things and nature, but I'm not necessarily somebody who needs to go there to experience that. I'm quite happy reading about it or watching documentaries.
It's really cool. The lakes are beautiful, aren't they? It's such a lovely place to re-energise, isn't it?
100%. I think just the air and the space. Sometimes it's a bit overwhelming with all the tourists, and obviously I'm adding to that. But yeah, really come back recharged.
Fantastic. And how about, you touched on it a little bit before. Tell us a little bit about your leadership experience. So what did you learn about yourself as a leader?
Yeah. So I actually started leadership roles quite early in my career. So I think I was about 25, 26 when I took on my first team. It was a team of one at the time, and you could only grow from there. And interestingly, so I was like 25, 26, and the person that I was leading was in their late 50s, let's say. And they had expected to get that job until I arrived. So cue, very interesting dynamic.
Word.
And I think somewhat awkward, yes, exactly. And I think what I did at that time, also feeling that awkwardness, was to try and be the leader that I thought I should be. So cue boldness, directness, very directive in my approach, a bit forceful, this kind of thing. And of course, it just jarred. It just jarred. There was a whole heap of pushback and so on. It wasn't working for her, and it certainly wasn't working for me. You know, I am not that forceful, directive boss at all. So I was exhausted by it and not having any fun whatsoever, and thinking, I'm not cut out for leadership. I can't do this. And then I remember we went for a dinner. We had to go to a conference, so we had a dinner together and just started having a more human conversation. And actually that allowed me to be much more me in that moment, kind of a deeper conversation, to really listen to what was going on for her, how she felt about the business, how she felt about me taking her role, all this kind of thing. And from that moment, it was a massive pivot in our working relationship, how then we performed as a team, actually how our bit of business started to perform. So I kind of intuitively learned at that point, but without a proper stop and reflect, I intuitively learned at that point, do you know, if I'm just myself and I listen with care, with empathy and so on, I'm going to get results. But it took me a few more iterations of growing in my career, taking on new teams, to really make that concrete and intentional in what I did. Because when I look back, very often I was taking on a new team and, well, I better assert myself and be, you know, the directive, forceful one again, because that's what leaders do.
Yeah.
And what's this definition of insanity? You keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result. Well, that's what I was doing, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until later in my career, when I started working with a coach, they were like, do you see what's happening there? Oh, you're right. So I really learned, actually, there isn't one way to be a leader. If you are the more forceful directive, that can work. But if it's not you, don't try and be that person. Be the leader you are, and you'll get far better results by behaving in that way. It took me a while to really land that and learn it, but it became quite successful. You know, in the end, I was, quite a senior director in the company. I was leading teams across different countries of different nationalities in a matrix without even formal reporting lines. But I think what worked for me was that people knew who I was, like the authentic Sarah, and they would come to me for that, and the trust was really high. So just being yourself was my big aha moment.
That's lovely. It's such a really nice reflection, isn't it, in terms of, you know, you see all that kind of putting up the barriers of this person I need to be as a leader, and actually the amount of energy you are putting into that, and rather than actually the job, you know, you're putting energy and your time and your attention into things that are about presenting in a certain way, rather than actually making an impact that you want to make in the right way. But yeah, being more yourself then allows you to kind of relax a little, actually, and then be your best a lot more. It's really, really lovely reflection. I really like that. And I think there's a lot to be said about helping people to understand that really early on. Like, be you, you know, amplify the best of you as much as possible, so that you can really, people can connect with you in the right way. I love that. Thank you for that. So, first question for you. Tell us a little bit about what it means to be an introvert.
Yeah, this is a really cool question, actually, because lots of people have different ideas about what it is to be an introvert, thinking it means you're shy or you're a hermit or this kind of thing. But actually, there's really just one common definition that everybody really agrees on, which is about your source of energy. So you were just mentioning how draining it can be, being this fake, trying to fit this mold that you're not. And really, the definition is around introverts tend to get their energy from quieter, introspective, alone time, whereas extroverts will get their energy from more social situations, being with people. That's where they'll feed their energy from. So something I learned far too late in my career, but was a big light bulb moment for me, was that the brains of introverts are more sensitive to dopamine. So this is why, when there's a whole heap of stuff going on around us in the work environment, busy meetings, chat, slides, videos, you name it, people coming in and out, whatever it is, our brains genuinely get overwhelmed by all the stimulus that's going on. And this is why often you'll find introverts starting to edge back in a meeting because it's too much. It's too much. Conversely, extroverts will be thriving on this, and it's giving them more and more energy. So you end up with these poles like tearing apart, absolutely tearing apart. So I think this then starts to lead to a whole heap of myths and misconceptions about what it is to be an introvert. So you'll hear things like, they don't speak up in a meeting and therefore they don't have anything to say. Whereas the reality is it's just a bit overwhelming right now. My brain is processing hard and I'm not ready to articulate those very complex thoughts that are starting to bubble in my head. And you'll hear things as well like, they've always got their head down working on something. And this deep focus, they're not good team players. Where actually the opposite is true. You will know better than I, how important that difference and diversity is in teams and having high performing teams. So if we miss people's contribution because, what they bring is that deep and focused work, we're missing potentially half of the team's ideas. So I think being an introvert in the workplace, as I say, is really about understanding your energy. That's the key difference in this continuum of introversion, extroversion. But how that shows up and the myths it perpetuates is a big thing. As I say, I'm on this mission to dispel the shake the status quo of what it means, because there's too many misconceptions that in the end really overlooks the value that introverts will bring in teams and in leadership roles.
And because you're self kind of defining as an introvert yourself and kind of sharing that with us, how did that feel for you as an introvert in a leadership role?
It's been a roller coaster at times. I remember, for example, doing the Insights Discovery Profile with my peers. And we would stand on this circle, you have the colours around the edge, you'd stand on the circle, and I worked in sales and marketing my whole career. So we have a lot of red, yellow profiles that be bright, be bold, be gone, and that involve me. And there I would be in the blue-green, show me the detail, show me you care over here, and feeling like this other person.
Yeah.
And the phrase on Insights would be coordinator or observer, something like this. Now my colleagues would be sitting in director and visionary. And these labels are quite unhelpful. Yeah. I'm actually a big fan of Insights because once you really understand it and understand how to use it, it's fantastic. But when you just tickle the surface and you stand on these labels, I genuinely remember somebody saying, "Don't worry, Sarah, you watch, we'll do all the work." Not so helpful. So, various times I think this feeling of what it was to be an introvert was a bit like square peg, round hole. And over time, it took a lot of work on self-belief, trust in my value, working with a coach, reading Susan Cain's amazing book, Quiet, was a big aha moment for me. But really having to put that work in to see what is the value I uniquely bring that my colleagues actually don't and miss out on if I'm not putting my point of view forward and not being included, not having a seat at the table.
And there's something really important there about your leaders as well, or the peer groups that you're working with, isn't there, in terms of kind of helping to bring that out more, isn't there, and kind of not losing sight of that from that perspective. So what would you say was particularly important for introverts in teams? What should we be looking out for as leaders?
Yeah, I think, it all starts with awareness and acceptance. It's the first thing. So often when teams are coming together, we race into the doing, we race into the what we're doing, and we forget about the how we're doing it. It's human nature, we go chasing the next problem or chasing the next opportunity and don't take that precious time before things really get busy to suss each other out. So I think it's really about carving out that time as a leader for yourself and your team, as individuals and as a group, to have those conversations. And sometimes they might feel a bit alien, a bit strange because you're not used to talking about those things. But it saves so many misunderstandings later on. Everybody has their good days and bad days. And when we hit crisis moments and stress, and we have, let's say a bolder leader really like, come on, let's go. And then the quieter ones are like, whoa. Haven't done the analysis, or I don't understand the big picture, or whatever it might be. We move in different directions, and there is no way you're going to succeed. Everyone's just going to get a horrible headache, tense shoulders, and go nowhere ultimately. So I think having those conversations early on for awareness and acceptance is critical. And it's not just about for the introverts, it's for everybody and what everybody brings, of course. And really understanding and articulating what value those quiet strengths bring. Because I've heard people say, well, they're good on the data analysis, or they're good on the deep listening, whatever it might be. But what I miss sometimes in those conversations is that, so what that means is, and helping to translate that. And because they're not skills we always talk about very often, their value is a bit squashed or a bit diminished somehow. So it's about making space for all those contributions that come from all those different angles and really helping them to shape agendas, whether it be of meetings, of workshops, of team days, to make sure that people can truly contribute in a way that feels comfortable and authentic. Again, it goes back to not feeling the need to pretend like you're somebody you're not, which is horribly exhausting and disheartening. And I think really damages people's confidence over time too. And the last thing I would say for leaders really wanting to get the best from their introverts is celebrate everybody equally. Again, some of those quiet strengths really get lost in terms of their value. And there are assumptions, and I've heard this too many times, that leaders will say, but Sarah's not comfortable having her successes celebrated on the stage. So we just say, well done, and tap on the shoulder. That's not okay. You're right. I don't like going on the stage and being given a trophy, but boy, does it do my career some good, because then everybody sees it. So, it's not only just about, please don't make Sarah uncomfortable. Nobody wants to, but let's think about what's the right thing for my team individual's career to help push them forward. And that might sometimes be a bit the elbow to get out of the comfort zone.
So interesting, because there's a piece there about understanding your team, but also not then just sinking into preference as well. Actually, there's a need to sometimes shove people out of their comfort zone, because actually if we always leave our extroverts in that space as well, that's not good for them either, is it? So how do we make sure we get that balance right between going, okay, I know that your preference would not be to go up on stage, but you deserve to have the light shone on your success. So, we'll make it quick, shall we? No, rather than not do it altogether. So yeah, really interesting perspective.
Yeah, exactly this. And, I'm the biggest advocate for playing to your strengths. Build on the foundations of your strengths always.
Yeah.
But then think about, what is it we want to achieve? If I want to stay exactly where I am, doing exactly what I'm doing, feeling like I'm feeling forever, that's okay. Some people do, and that's okay, no problem. But if there's something you want to grow towards, develop, build, you're going to have to, yes, use your strengths as foundations, but you're also going to have to stretch yourself somewhere. Otherwise, you're staying where you are. So I always have this phrase, and I wish I knew where it came from. I don't know. But this idea of the loving boot as a manager, that, you want some care, you want the arm around you to support you and help you grow, but you need the boot up the ass sometimes just to go, come on, you can do it. And you'll be okay because I've got your back.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really great. Thank you for that. In terms of understanding the individuals in your teams better, and especially if you're different, maybe as your energy level is generated in a different way to other people in your team, what would be your tips for how they can kind of get to know those people?
Yeah, it's a good one. I think, first of all, it's about ask, don't assume. I see lots of leaders assuming things about introverts. They sort of observe behavior and will say, well, it can be two ends of the spectrum, actually. So I've heard both about me and my fellow introverts. So either you don't look like an introvert, whatever that means, whatever we're supposed to look like, I'm not sure. Or, well, you don't really come out of your shell, do you? And then assumptions start to layer on top of that. So what does that mean if you're portraying yourself this way or that way? What does that mean I believe about you? And we end up in all sorts of, very stereotypical, myth-led conversations. So big advocate of just have a conversation one-on-one, talking about what do you enjoy? What do you not enjoy? What's behind that? What do you believe about yourself? Where do you feel most confident? Where would you like to go? Really having those conversations one-on-one and ongoing. I think a lot of the time they happen at end of year review, performance conversation, maybe mid-year, or development conversation, whenever that happens in the year. And then we never talk about it again. Or at a workshop, like an insights workshop or something similar. And then it goes in the drawer and we don't talk about it. So I think it's the responsibility of the leader and line manager, but it's also your responsibility as an individual to prompt those conversations if you're not having them and you want to. I think it goes both ways. It's not just my manager never asked me, go and tell them then. Go and tell them, which takes confidence, it takes self-belief, it takes psychological safety to do it, but just make a start and help to normalize that. I think once you start with those positive one-on-one conversations, it's also helpful to have the team conversations. I've seen too often as well that a leader will make a bit of a contract with the introvert in their team about how they are allowed to behave. So an example would be, I was speaking with somebody several months ago now, and they said, I figured out with the very quiet lady in the team, she never says anything at the meeting, but she'll come and tell me afterwards. Have a problem with that. Because fine, she's now expressed her idea to the leader. Great. But nobody else heard it. So nobody else can build on that idea. And she doesn't get the credit for that idea either. Avoiding these little one-on-one contracts, let's have a conversation as a team then. How can we as a team shape the workshop, the meeting, whatever it is, to make sure the introverts have the time to plan in advance? So it might be a pre-read, have some reflection time before a decision is made. So think about the timings of the breaks or how we invite people to contribute, this kind of thing. But also making sure that it works for the extroverts too, right? It's not about tipping it all the other way all of a sudden. How do we get this blend? And getting the team to design that is the best possible way, because then there's real ownership and people want to make it work. So yeah, fostering that kind of dialogue as a leader for your introverts and for the wider team, I think is real gold dust.
Love that. I love that reflection in terms of this shouldn't be a one-off conversation, that you've done your input into that view on it, and the importance of the feedback and the continual feedback alongside that, I think is really valuable, isn't it? In terms of like, how did that go for you? What feedback do you need to give me? Absolutely, in terms of kind of how I'm managing that situation. What have we missed there? What are the opportunities? But I love that reflection of kind of bringing the whole team into it, because then it isn't about singling out people. It's about how do we enable this full team to work effectively. So yeah, really lovely. Thank you. Okay, so what would you say would be the impact of not being deliberate about paying attention to kind of the different needs of people across your team?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think it is still true, unfortunately, that mostly in business still there is this extroverted ideal. And there is still this general tendency that extroverted behaviors are rewarded and the quiet ones are diminished and pushed aside. And I think what starts to happen in those situations is, remembering that introverts are probably half, more than a third, but at least, around a half of the working population in your team will be introverts, greater or lesser, but somewhere in there. So if we keep perpetuating this extroverted ideal of behaviours, we end up that half of the people aren't fully contributing. So we're missing out on that deep listening, those reflective skills, the strategy, the attention to detail. We can go on with the list. And what that tends to happen then is your team kind of goes in one direction. It's like a tree that should grow like this in all directions, right? But you end up kind of going over on one side. And I've always been a big believer, especially when we have big challenging problems to solve in our team or a project, something like this. If you only get this, what are you missing out on? You may have gone completely the wrong direction. So I think it's not good for the team and the business to miss out on this full scope. But eventually, for the people who aren't being fully included, you end up in a situation where they will become disengaged. They will start to doubt themselves and their capabilities, and their confidence starts to go down, which then perpetuates the situation even more. You'll get more and more in those meetings, stepping back. Well, you never come out of your shell. Whoa. Cue major retreat. And we end up in quite a negative spiral. So I think there's a lot we're missing out on. But then if we're not careful, we amplify the level of missing out if we don't address some of the things at the roots about how we're inviting people to behave and how we are signalling what's expected, what good looks like.
I love that phrase, that signalling behaviour, that, how we're inviting people to behave is really important. And as a leader, you've got to be careful of the shadow you're kind of projecting there in terms of actually it has to be in this way or it has to be in that way. And actually, how are we amplifying the individual? We all have different things going on, don't we? And whether that's our energy levels or our concentration levels or our whatever that might be that gets to the bottom of where we are performing, I think it's really valuable that kind of being deliberate about those interactions is really important. We've touched on some of the tips already. So you've given us already some brilliant tips for leaders in terms of how they engage with their introverts, but also the broader team. How do we make sure we're having great conversations across the team in terms of how we're going to get the best performance as a group? And I love that analogy of the tree, of it bending one way because we're only thinking of it in other ways, and actually we've got a much healthier tree if we're looking at it from all perspectives. I really love that. Are there any other top tips you would give to leaders in terms of helping their introverts to shine?
There's loads.
My book.
I often give people, buy a book. I often give people this kind of 5-point checklist. So I'm going to think what I've covered and what I haven't covered. So hang on. So we talked about ask, don't assume. We talked about this, right? So this whole thing of really helping people with their self-awareness, self-acceptance, For me, the biggest thing was reading about it and learning about it. So I mentioned before Susan Cain's book. Been out about 10 years now. But I recommend this to anybody and everybody. And my book actually was kind of my idea of the sequel to this, so that for the level of awareness from that, it blew my mind. It was like a kind of chicken soup for my soul of permission to be who I am. And then my book was a bit the practical guide after that. So what to do with that now in the business world? Like, what do you do? So that's how I built it, which again is all about awareness, acceptance, self-understanding is a huge one, is absolutely huge. I think maybe something we didn't cover, which would be one of my top tips, is around energy. So we talked about the definition of introverts being about where you get energy from. So my tip for leaders is to be mindful of that. So if you're a leader who is more extroverted on the continuum, you might think the best way to reward your team or to engage and energize your team is to go and have this belting team day, big workshop, big brainstorm, whatever it might be. And then you get frustrated when people aren't joining in. Yeah, I've been that person as well. I'm not joining in because I can't take a full day like that. It is too much. My brain is overwhelmed. So use that awareness, understanding, have the conversation with the team about what everybody would like to do, how everybody would like to experience that day, what you want to get out of it, and build your day around your people, not just around what you would like to do, but what would your people in a united way love to do. That goes for those big team days, but also just day to day, to give permission to recharge. And I think if you're an introverted leader, my big learning later on in my career was to role model that stuff and to articulate that as you go along. So to make a point of saying, actually, I'm going to be half an hour late to that meeting because I need to go and do something else for a bit because my brain is so fried and scrambled. I can come, but I'll sit there and I won't contribute. I can't. I need 15 minutes, whatever it is, just to go and take a breath, take a walk, chill out. I'll be back. And I can't tell you the number of people that thank you for that because, again, half the people in the room felt the same, but didn't dare say it because they'd look like they'd failed or something was wrong or people would laugh or whatever. I can tell you nobody laughed. Everyone was like, yeah, good on you. Good on you. So respecting that energy, role modeling it, giving permission is a huge topic, I think, that we start to talk more and more about health, well-being, rest, but beyond a kind of yoga session, coffee, donuts on a Tuesday morning, we're not really living and breathing it yet as we could be. So that's a big one for me.
It's a very proactive way of thinking about things, isn't it? That energy piece. And it's making me think about a workshop I'm putting together in October, and like it's gonna, have the lunch session. And now I'm thinking, actually, should I invite people to come and have lunch who want to have lunch, and then create something else that allows somebody to go and have a picnic and go off and have an hour to themselves if that's what they'd rather do, so they can engage in the afternoon in the way that works for them. So thank you, that's given me some reflection points for my own way of doing things, because that is, your energy is so important to how you perform, isn't it? And it's so vital that you are in the right place. And just because I might enjoy having lunch with everybody, I'd actually probably prefer to have the hour on my own. But as the host, maybe I should just be role modeling. I'll put on lunch for those who want to have lunch. I'm going to go and have an hour to myself. Really interesting. Yeah. Really interesting. Yeah. And it gives permission, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I've had a similar conversation with other leaders, trainers, facilitators, saying similar things. I felt like I should, and I've banned the word should by now, but I felt like I should join the dinner, join the lunch, do the whatever it might be. But I am exhausted. I need the time to digest the morning or whatever's been happening, digest the morning, think about what's next. So I'm a big advocate. We think we've got a day together. Let's jam everything in. probably the gold happens in about, you tell me, 40% of the time, 50% of the time. The rest is... So what if instead of cramming those spaces with more, we freed it with less and we had space? Just curious how it would change things.
Really interesting. Really interesting. Anything else that you wanted to share at all? Anything else you think our leaders should be thinking about for their introvert?
Yeah. Maybe as a kind of final thought, I think it's helping the introverts in your team to realise that they're not somehow less than if they're different to the prevailing wind of what success looks like. And really helping to champion them, that just because they're not the one volunteering to present on the stage or whatever it might be, that's the norm and expected if you want to be successful. Really supporting and championing them, because I've seen so many people whose confidence gets shredded, absolutely shredded, in end of year reviews or comments that get thrown about in meetings or in team sessions. So watch language. Watch language and really foster that self-belief, that confidence, and this kind of thought of it's okay to be an introvert, it's okay to be you, and have that dialogue, as I was saying before. How can we, not just on your shoulders, but how can we help you to get to where you want to be? Whatever that looks like, how can we do that that's authentic to you, is going to feel good and energizing for you, and not somehow make you have to perform in these ways that are only going to make you unhappy and exhausted. So yeah, really, really keep an eye on that.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's been absolutely wonderful to have you with us. Tell us a little bit about where people can find you if they'd like to follow up on anything you shared today.
Yeah, super. So 3 main ways, I think. So LinkedIn, so you'll find me Sarah Manley TQC for the Quiet Catalyst. You can also find about my services and what I do on my website, which is thequietcatalyst.com. And of course, you will find me through my book. So it's called Quiet Catalyst, The Introvert's Guide to Thriving in Your Career. You'll find it on my website. You'll also find it on Amazon. And if you do buy it, I would love a review. This is wonderful for me to receive, but also helps spread the word as well that this book exists, and it helps the algorithm on Amazon to recommend it to other introverts who could benefit as well. So those are the key ways to get in touch.
That's lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us on this episode, and I hope you will join us again some other time. Thank you.
Thank you for joining this episode of the Purple Sky Thinking for Leaders podcast. You'll find all the resources and the links that we mentioned down in the show notes. If you love this episode, why not share it with somebody else in a leadership role who you think would find this useful? If you haven't already, I'd love for you to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And if we've earned it, why not leave us a 5-star review? I'm Anwen, your host, and I look forward to welcoming you back to the Purple Sky Thinking for Leaders podcast very soon. Bye for now.